I just feel like I've been around the block, ripping up fantasy stock, working around the clock. Look at the view from the top. Researching rookies a lot? No, I just be listening to pods. Yeah, one in particular, I'm just a messenger. Let me just pass on the rock. Browning, Brunning, Bruning, pronouncing ain't what he's doing. What he's doing is not losing, but infusing you with new things. And there's Dennis the Bennett, yeah. The man is a menace, yeah. Building a dynasty, some of the finest things. Promise you, you won't regret it. Sly as a fox, cultured in pop. Give him his props. Here is a thought, here is a box, and you cannot compare them at all. So don't even try. Careful with the news, but when you use a take, I take up Tony Fire. I mean Dyer, because anyone else is a huge mistake. Whoa, fantasy round table, fantasy round table, yeah. Fantasy round table. Come take a look at the crown, baby. Hey, fantasy round table, fantasy round table, woo. Fantasy round table. Come take a look at the crown, baby. Go.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Fantasy Football Roundtable Podcast. It is Tuesday. Week 13 is in the books. Week 14 just around the corner. But first, we will recap the action. We talked about the Thanksgiving slate when we were with you on Friday. So that leads us to kick off with a Black Friday game that was not only a good matchup as the Bears and Eagles met, it gave us a surprising result as the Bears came away with the victory, moved to 9-3. Dennis, don't look now, but they are currently the number one overall seed in the NFC. Are they for real?
No, not yet. I mean, they are a team that is showing flashes. They are piecing it together. They've got a head coach that's a really, really high-level offensive mind. They need to continue to build on both sides of the ball. They have talent, and they've got a lot of good skill players. So all through my oldest son's academic career, we would have a meeting with the principal at the beginning of every year. Like, we got a new principal once, and we're like, hey, we need to have a meeting about our son. And he's like, why? He'll be fine. And I'm like, no, you don't understand. And Caleb was just really, really, he wasn't rambunctious, but he could be a handful. He was super smart. And we would always meet and say, look, we need to work together to figure out how not to educate the creativity out of him. We understand the school has rules and we expect him to follow the rules. Caleb Williams is just like my son Caleb, except when it comes to playing quarterback. He'll do some shit that gets him in trouble. And then he'll do some other really good stuff. He's fast. When he runs, he makes stuff happen. He's got a really good arm. He can be really accurate. And he's got a great set of weapons with DJ Moore and Colston Loveland and Roma Dunze, DeAndre Swift. They have a lot of weapons on that offense and a really creative play caller. Ben Johnson right now is trying to find that balance, keep Caleb Williams creative and engaged, and not educate the creativity out of him. I think it's going to take another year. And a lot of that comes with, I'm sure, Matt, you've done training before, and there's, you start something, you get a new trainee and they're unconsciously incompetent. They don't know what they don't know. Then they realize, oh shit, I don't know a lot of stuff. Now they're consciously incompetent. Then you take them to the next level where they're consciously competent. I think that's where Caleb Williams is right now, is he's bridging the gap from consciously incompetent to consciously competent, meaning he's got to still think pretty heavy about what he's executing. This time next year, he's going to be full on into the unconsciously competent. That's where we see the Josh Allens and the Patrick Mahomes, these guys that have been in an offense for a while, the Jared Goffs. It's not always perfect, but they know what they're doing and they don't have to think about it. I think Caleb Williams is on his way there. I don't think they finished the year as the number one seed, but it sure looks like they're going to win the AFC North.
I'm not sure they win the NFC North either, but I think they will make the playoffs. I'll be curious to see if they can keep that run game going because Caleb Williams was fine on Friday, but when you have DeAndre Swift and Kyle Monangai each going for more than 100 yards against a pretty vaunted defense, that's a good sign. For the Eagles, there was a lot of chirping from A.J. Brown early in the season, very dissatisfied. But the last couple of weeks, they seem to have made an effort to get him involved, and he is showing that was a good idea. He's been pretty explosive down the stretch here. Do you think he could continue to be explosive down the stretch of our fantasy season?
Yeah, I mean, we know he's good. There's no doubt about that. The issue is Jalen Hurts going to throw the ball 12 times or is he going to throw it 30 times? And for the A.J. Brown managers, the real benefit right now is Saquon Barkley isn't producing like he did last year. He only had 56 yards rushing against the Bears, who I think can be ran on. The Eagles aren't quite clicking like they did, and Sirianni's not taking the play calling away from Patullo, but it wouldn't surprise me that if he butts his nose in there a little more. But Sirianni came through the ranks, and when he took over in Philadelphia, he didn't take over because, hey, I'm a play caller and I'm going to call plays. He went right straight to I'm going to manage the manager's approach, and I think he does that pretty well, despite coming off a little bit weird. Brown is up to wide receiver 14 on the year now. That's not where he was being drafted. That's still plenty below that. But he's making a run. And Jalen Hurts, he threw the ball 34 times against the Bears. Granted, they were behind a little bit, and he had to make more plays in the fourth quarter. So they have a narrow funnel. It's A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, Dallas Goedert, and Saquon Barkley on the ground. So you'd think there'll be, as they drive to the playoffs, they're going to need to make plays in the passing game, and Brown and Smith are going to be that vehicle.
Moving to the Sunday games, the San Francisco 49ers at the Cleveland Browns got the 26-8 victory. 49ers now moved to 9-4 going into their bye. One of a collection of teams in the NFC with 9 wins. They've been largely overshadowed by the Rams and the Seahawks, who are really only 9-3, only a half game in front of them. How do we feel about them as contenders? I mean, they seem like they've been a good team. I don't think anything has been incredibly impressive offensively or defensively, but they've weathered a lot of injuries and just seem to be hanging around there.
I saw a blurb on Roto World today that, I don't know if it was Shanahan or Lynch said, we still hope to get Brandon Ayuk back this season. He ain't coming back. I hate to be the bearer of bad news.
Not this season, not ever, probably.
Yep. So, if they can continue to stay healthy, I think Mac Jones provided a nice stabilizing bridge from a backup perspective while Purdy was injured. They've got Christian McCaffrey. Brian Robinson is a nice, solid change of pace back. And Juwan Jennings is healthy, mostly healthy. He's putting up numbers. George Kittle is back, mostly healthy. Honestly, they need somebody. They need a wide receiver too. Pearsall has been uninspiring since his return. Kendrick Bourne is good for
That's the kindest way of describing Ricky Pearsall. I've seen a lot less kind things on fantasy threads.
Bourne and Robinson, are each making a play about once every 3 weeks. So it's narrowed the funnel there with Kittle and Jennings and McCaffrey. For fantasy, that's what I feel like.
Want. If anything happens to McCaffrey, the 49ers are boned. But as long as he keeps going, they seem okay.
Yep. Meanwhile, and he's on pace for what, like 9,400 carries or something?
Yeah, 9,400 touches. Yeah. Meanwhile, this past week, the Browns said that they would be open to giving Shedeur Sanders a look for the rest of the year to see if he could be the guy. We've seen 2 starts. Do you think he could be the guy?
Well, he's definitely a guy. I mean, what is 64% completion for the 145 yards and 1 touchdown? Ultimately, you've got to see. So they started Dillon Gabriel for what, 5 games, something like that. They need to see what they have in Shedeur Sanders, because he might be the guy, but he doesn't feel like he is, a Caleb Williams-esque kind of elevator guy that can make some wild plays.
Gabriel got 6 starts, 1 and 5.
So I think that gave him a feel for, Gabriel. I think they know he could be a game manager. They need to have their offensive line be better for Gabriel. Shedeur, big knock is he holds the ball too long, but Jerry Jeudy has started to come around. Cedric Tillman is back. He has a nice chemistry with Harold Fannin, which has really put the kibosh on David Njoku. Quinshon Judkins is a volume back at this point. He's gonna handle the carries and the Wildcat stuff, but he isn't really providing any big plays. He's not super efficient, but he's getting the job done that they're asking him to do. So what can Sanders do? I think he can be in that 65% completion rate, but I think we're a ways off from him putting up back-to-back 350-yard, 3-touchdown games.
Well, and I mean, if the benchmark he's chasing, Gabriel was 1 and 5, only had 185 pass attempts in 6 starts, less than 60% completions, only 937 yards in 6 starts, sacked 18 times, which is 3 a game. So, man, not a high bar. Going on to the AFC South, we had a couple of interesting matchups. First, the Jaguars went to Tennessee and won in a kind of cruiser, 25-3. Big breakout for Jacoby Myers, caught 6 passes for 90 yards and touchdown, seems to be developing chemistry with Trevor Lawrence. They traded for him. They need him. Do you like him as an option going down the stretch for fantasy?
Yeah, he was wide receiver 46 in 9 games with the Raiders. He's been wide receiver 14 in 4 games since he joined the Jaguars. It troubles me as a Brian Thomas rosterer that Brian Thomas has been there with Trevor Lawrence for going on 2 years now and has not developed chemistry. Jacoby Myers has been there a month and he's starting to light it up.
I mean, it seems like Myers and Brenton Strange are the guys you want right now.
They definitely are. And then we'll see what happens when who'd they lose?
Travis Hunter
gets back, because it felt like we were being force-fed the chemistry development between Hunter and Lawrence. The running game hasn't upheld its end of the deal this year. But I think Lawrence is playing better, if not great, that for whatever that's worth. But yeah, Myers is playing very well, and Brenton Strange, since he's gotten healthy, is startable each week.
I think the word you were looking for is bromance, that they were trying to force feed for us. Not much to say about the Titans other than I hope you don't have to play or rely on any Titans in fantasy.
Cam Ward is getting a little bit better each week, and the team isn't good. And while he didn't put up a ton of yards, he's developing good chemistry with Gunnar Helm. If you're in Dynasty, man, if you can go out and snag you a few extra shares of Gunnar Helm, they don't have anything at wide receiver. A.O. Minor is probably their best, and he's being outworked by Chimere Dike, and Ridley. His career seems like it's over. So they need to bring in a stud wide receiver. But right now, if you have to start one player on that offense, it's Gunnar Helm.
I don't know, man. He's splitting targets with Chigakonkwo. I honestly, playing for a fantasy playoff, I'm not playing any of them.
Well, it depends on your choices.
Yeah. You just don't know what Titan you're going to get. The other AFC South matchup had bigger playoff implications. The Texans went in and got the 20-16 win over the Colts. Colts spiraling a little bit. We'll get to them in a minute. They now have fallen technically behind Jacksonville in that division. But I want to start with the Texans. They've won 4 straight, now back to 7-5. They close at the Chiefs, home for the Cardinals and Raiders, at the Chargers, home for the Colts. Do you think that they have a decent shot of getting into the playoffs?
I think they do. They've won 4 straight, like you said. They've also won 7-9. So after starting 0-3, and what was it? 3 or 4 of those games were with Davis Mills at quarterback. So
Yep.
they're playing just well enough on offense because they've got that phenomenal defense. Now, Nico Collins is back and CJ Stroud is back, and they're starting to get a little bit of production out of the running game. While the numbers weren't huge, Marks did have 64 yards. Chubb had 34 yards and a touchdown. Nico Collins is the one there, but it looks like Jaden Higgins has moved up to the wide receiver 2 role there. He was 5 for 5 for 65. And I missed Christian Kirk. Was he just not active last week?
I think he's been hurt, yeah.
I know he had been hurt, but he came back. I thought he was I missed him in the lineup. Caught me off guard.
Yeah, I mean, air is breathable, water is wet. Christian Kirk is unavailable. That seems to be his kind of modus operandi. Meanwhile, for the Colts, I'm looking, actually, maybe he just sucks because I don't see him on the injury report. So maybe he go back and look.
Just lost his job to Jaden Higgins and Xavier Hutchinson.
Oh, wait, I was looking at the wrong team. Oh, damn it. I was looking at the Jaguars injury report. Oh, I don't see Christian Kirk. You know what? I won't. I forgot he flipped teams in his division. I don't really see him. I don't see him on the injury report for the Texans either. Those are the only 2 options of teams he could have played for. So he didn't seem like he has done a whole lot. And, maybe if they're getting good games from Higgins, that's all they really need.
Yeah, it just felt like he was like set up to be their slot guy, and then he got injured, and when he came back, it felt like he was their number 2 behind Collins, and then he just kind of faded.
Yeah, he didn't get a target, so he must not have been in there. Meanwhile, the Colts were once the number 1 overall seed in the AFC. Now they're not even number 1 in their own division. They close at the Jaguars, at the Seahawks, home for the 49ers, home for the Jaguars, at the Texans. Could the Colts be in trouble?
They could be. Let me see. Oh, Kirk played 49% of the snaps. So that's wild. Yeah. So they've got to kind of get the ship righted. They do have 3 division games left. They played Houston once and Jacksonville twice. So that's obviously good for their opportunities if they can win them. Jonathan Taylor, since the bye week, has kind of fallen off a little bit. But they do get the league worst Jacksonville Jaguars run defense 2 times in the next 5 weeks, starting with this week. So that may be an opportunity for Taylor to bounce back. Last week just felt like it was weird because the game flow felt like it was tailor-made for Michael Pittman. And he couldn't get anything going. And Alec Pierce was, you would have thought with that Houston pass rush on Daniel Jones, they weren't going to try to work downfield as much. But Pierce was getting plenty of intermediate work. And Pittman just couldn't pull it together. Warren came through with a touchdown to kind of save it. But I suspect Pierce was on a lot of people's benches.
Well, and one of the things that we liked best about Daniel Jones in this offense was the rushing element he added, and with a fracture in the bone in his leg. I know they're saying it's a minor fracture and he's playing through it, but I'm sorry, that that seems like that changes the way you're going to play, some of the chances you're going to take, the way you're able to do. And I think we've seen that reflected, and they haven't been able to get Jonathan Taylor going on the ground either in most of these games. 45 yards against the Steelers. He only had 58 against Kansas City. He only had 85 against Houston. And he's getting carries. He had a huge game against Atlanta smushed in there, but no touchdowns in any of those games. If the Colts struggle, they're not playing a team that has less than 7 wins in that last 5. That is a pretty brutal, loaded last 5 stretch. They could easily play themselves out of the playoffs altogether, which was not on my bingo card.
Yeah, it's going to be a challenge for them. Like I said, they've got 3 division games in these last 5, and if they can pull off those 3 games, they'll be sitting good.
The Miami Dolphins hosted the New Orleans Saints, got the 21-17 victory. The Saints traded for Devon Vele before the season, and after moving Rashid Shaheed, he has stepped in. We saw him 8 receptions, 93 yards, and a touchdown. Seems to be really taking over a good role in that offense. How are you feeling about him?
Somebody's got to be the wide receiver too there. I mean, Mason Tipton, does that get your berries tingling?
It does.
So it really feels like Juwan Johnson and Foster Moreau are the other receivers. So Vele has a chance. He's a big slot guy, but they like to play Olave out of the slot. I think they complement each other pretty well because Olave is a smaller, faster guy. Vele is a bigger, stronger guy with not quite the speed. So unfortunately, it's great down the stretch here. I think Vele gets plenty of opportunity. I don't know how I project it forward into next year. What's going to happen? It likely feels like they're going to be in one of the top 3 rookie quarterbacks. They're going to be in that position. Maybe Tyler Shook catches fire and they're like, oh, well, we're going to ride this guy. But I'm not optimistic about that. It feels like they're going to take one of those top 3 QBs in next year's draft. Having Kamara hurt and being 30 years old, they need to see if Devin Neal can be the successor there. It's a team that age and salary cap is, I think, finally caught up with them.
Yeah, and it looks so. Part of me wonders if they're not going to go quarterback and do a little bit of what the Texans did and have to bide some time because they still have a shit ton of dead money in 2026. Looking at the 2026 cap, they're already projected as 16 million over before the season gets underway. They're going to have to shed contracts, and they probably really need to completely flip over the roster, in which case maybe you're talking about a more long-term rebuild. So it'd be interesting to see I know if you're a Saints fan, you're not super pumped about that, but I don't think they're one rookie quarterback away from competing in their division. So they might be better off trying to, bottom out, eat all the dead cap that they can eat the next season, and then try to stockpile draft picks.
Well, but we've said that about him for like 8 years in a row now, and Mickey Loomis just keeps kicking the can down the street. And they really should. I agree with you. They should. And if I'm Kellen Moore, I'm probably going to try to push for that. But does that mean he'll get a long leash to rebuild the team and get talent 2 years, start getting talent 2 years from now? Because Cam Jordan is old on defense, and they need to kind of build from the inside out and maybe add a quarterback in 2027.
Yeah. Meanwhile, for the Dolphins, they've improved to 5-7. Not a spectacular season, but I want to talk about Devon Achane for Dynasty. One of the questions we've had the last few years is, could he hold up? Could he carry a full load? And I think this season, despite the kind of dumpster fire around him, we've seen some good things. 186 carries so far, already has 1,034 yards, 6 touchdowns. He's been durable. He can do that 20 carries a game. He's also had 54 receptions for 370 yards and 4 more touchdowns, feeling kind of maybe like vintage Alvin Kamara. But how are you feeling about Achane for Dynasty?
I'm super high on him, and it troubles me to say that because he weighs 185 pounds. He's the littlest of little running backs that get a ton of volume. But the more the season goes on, the more it feels like Mike McDaniel is going to be back next year. And if McDaniel is back, then Tua is back, Waddle is back, Achane's back. They're going to continue to try to build that team around.
They have no choice but to bring Tua back after we saw the millstone of that contract.
So, Achane's on pace for 102 targets this year, and he's averaging 86 yards per game on the ground. Dynasty Nerds has him sitting at RB4 right now in their Dynasty running back rankings. So, while I would never, this is his 3rd year now, I would never be like, hey, you've got to hold him if somebody decided they wanted to get rid of him before he got injured because he's small. At some point, I got to eat crow and say the guy's worth holding on to. He's producing. He doesn't take a lot of big hits. He does a ton of work in the passing game, and he's super efficient in the ground game, and that offense knows how to use him. So you fire him up and let's go.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I was just looking at his he's tied for RB4. Wait, let's see. Points per game. I gotta hit the right. He's RB5 right now. He was RB5 last year. He was RB5 on a points per game basis in 2023. He just didn't get as many touches in games and starts. So pretty remarkable consistency too.
185 pounds too. When he came out, I said, look, his upside, like his upside comp is Warwick Dunn. And I got to be honest, I think he's lived up to that.
The Atlanta Falcons went to New York, and the Jets got the 27-24 come from behind victory. For the Falcons, not only do they lose, they got some troubling news this last week. It came out that with the damage in Michael Penix's knee and the surgery, they're now not optimistic that he'll be available to play at all in 2026. They obviously still have Kirk Cousins. That hasn't looked great for a Falcons team that 2 off seasons ago felt like it was trending toward being an NFC contender. What are they doing long-term, you think, at quarterback?
I think they're going to end up eating Penix's contract. Maybe he does him a solid and retires and is like, hey, two operations on each knee is just more than I can handle. But he's a competitor. You don't make it to the NFL not being a competitor. Now, Penix is a little bit of an older prospect. Cousins hasn't looked phenomenal. He had an okay game this week, 234 yards and a touchdown. Made good use of Kyle Pitts. You love to see that. Drake London has been out. And so with the tools that they have, they probably need to invest in a little bit more in the O-line. See if they can bring Algier back. If I'm Algier, I don't, what are they going to do to convince me that we can make a run to the Super Bowl? Because if I'm Tyler Algier, you've got to convince me we're going to the Super Bowl, or I'm going to go try to find a job where I can be a starter and contribute to building that team. Because I can look across the room and see Bijan Robinson, and yeah, it's great. I had 8 carries and had a total of 10 opportunities to Bijan's 30 opportunities this week. And we're not going to see that change. That's for sure.
And the brutal thing is they're going to ruin some prime years of Bijan and Drake London when they have them on rookie contracts. I'm not sure they'll bring back Kyle Pitts. It feels like that's just been up and down, and he might, like Evan Ingram, benefit from going somewhere else. Just like Tyler Algier. I wonder what happens with Raheem Morris, because part of that energy and excitement was Raheem Morris coming in, going to lead us back to the playoffs. And I have to say, they don't look like a well-coached team the last 2 years. They haven't been particularly stout on defense either. So for
those two rookie ends are coming on, Pierce and Walker.
Yeah. For the Jets, they got Adonai Mitchell going, 8 receptions, 102 yards, and a touchdown. They did generally look like they had a better pass offense with Tyrod Taylor. Do you think this was a promising sign for Mitchell and the Jets?
Well, I said it before, and I'll say it again. I don't hate the combo of Garrett Wilson, Adonai Mitchell, and John Mechie, and then you throw in Mason Taylor and see what they can do at the running back. Are they going to bring Breece back? They could franchise tag him. They've got Braylon Allen, who's coming off his injury. There was some excitement about their backup. I think Isaiah Davis is his name, but he hasn't really lived up to that excitement. He didn't even get a carry this week. Mechie got a carry over him. But if there's some potential there, they need to do something with the quarterback room. God bless it, but Justin Fields ain't it. And Tyrod Taylor, 33 pass attempts for 172 yards. I think that's what you're going to get out of him. And that's not the kind of quarterback you want with Garrett Wilson, Adonai Mitchell, John Mechie, and Mason Taylor. Oh, and potentially a pass catching back the level of Breece Hall. So they're going to need to do something. Right now, let's see, they're sitting at pick 7 right now, which puts them out on the top 3 quarterbacks unless they move up. So they'd be looking in the second round at guys like Lenoris Sellers, John Mateer, Garrett Nussmeier, and the kid out of Cincinnati, I forget his name, is starting to get a little bit of recognition. But I don't think any of those quarterbacks, if you draft them in the second round, are going to step in and be your starter. So you're going to have to go with a veteran. But you're going to, guys that may be available, Kyler Murray, Mac Jones, who was the other? Davis Mills. Some of those guys might be available. Russell Wilson will definitely be available.
I think Wilson's going to end up retiring personally, but
he should. That was a joke. Yeah.
The Arizona Cardinals went to Tampa Bay, and the Buccaneers held up 20-17, getting the victory. I want to ask you about Bam Knight. Some people have been excited about him. I feel like he's been a little inconsistent, but we saw him again lead the backfield with 62 yards on 11 carries, getting some receptions. They're about to get Trey Benson back. Is Knight a guy that you would hold even on a speculative basis?
So he is a classic hashtag 2 to 3 year window back that's at the end of the 2 to 3 years. And he really only got a shot because James Conner and Benson were injured, and Michael Carter was terribly inefficient.
Also, I feel like people forgot that he's at the end of that 2 to 3 year window because he used to go by Zonovan Knight the last time he was. Now I changed it to Bam.
Yeah, I mean, he feels like a career RB3 on your team, that if you end up in a situation like the Cardinals did this year, where we need a quote unquote professional running back that we know can pick up a blitz, can, catch a pass, can handle 20 carries if that's what we need,
Feels
he
like
can do it, but he's probably,
Johnson career arc.
What's that?
The Ernest Johnson career.
Yeah. He's entering the bounce around the back of the running back room phase of his career. And, he'll be a classic zero RB guy for the next couple of years, that zero RB drafters are taking him late in drafts, saying, well, if he gets he had a couple injuries in front of him before. So yeah, if I roster him and I can move him for a 3rd round pick, I'd do it in a heartbeat.
Meanwhile, Tampa Bay, they win 7-5. They're still clinging to a lead in their division. They have 2 matchups with Carolina coming up. They've been beat up. They started with some zest. They really got pounded down by a tough middle of the season schedule. How do we feel about them among the NFC contenders?
So if the playoffs started right now, they'd be facing the Seahawks. And I think they'd probably be favored against the Seahawks on the road.
I think I'd probably take the Seahawks, though.
Yeah. I don't know. There's as much as I would want to, what it comes down to is which of the 2 quarterbacks do I think can will their team to a win? I don't feel that way about Sam Darnold. Darnold needs things to go right. Baker can make chicken salad out of chicken feathers. Yeah. Sam Darnold can't do that. But, they got Bucky Irving back. He wasn't super efficient this week. But, he did show some of that same flash. I think he'll be fine. They don't, they only gave Rachaad White and Sean Tucker a total of 4 carries. And I don't think they gave, White had 3 targets. So Irving had 19 opportunities. So they're right back to Bucky Irving's the volume hog, and he's going to continue to get that. Godwin seems to be rounding into form now. Emeka Egbuka, well, he's getting into a little bit of ups and downs. He's generally going to be the guy there. And then you've got the tight end, Cade Otton, and Tez Johnson, the 3rd wide receiver. I think they've got good depth at their skill positions. I don't know that I want to put many of them in my lineup outside of Irving, Godwin, and Egbuka. But one of them, whether it's, Rachaad White or Sean Tucker, Tez Johnson, Cade Otton, seems like each week if you try to play more than the top 3, it's going to be whack-a-mole on which one of those is fantasy relevant.
The Rams went to Carolina, and the Panthers got the 31-28 victory. Dennis, we saw Blake Corum get a little more involved. 7 carries, 81 yards, had a big 34-yard breakaway run to help the Rams try to make a comeback there, got a touchdown. Are you feeling a little bit better about him having some low-end flex appeal?
Yeah, at first I was like, I don't know, maybe, when they get a lead, they're a little more willing to give him some opportunity. But Corum is starting to kind of show he belongs in the NFL. He's making some plays. The Rams can get out of Kyren Williams' contract after this year with $9 million in dead cap. So that's not untenable. But it feels like they'll wait and get rid of Williams after next year. They'll continue with the 2 guys. I think they'll have to sign Corum to an extension probably because I think he'll be finishing up his 3rd year next year. But the Rams, that offense runs through Puka Nacua and Devontae Adams. Kyren Williams, earlier in the year and last year, he was a volume hog. And I think Corum's explosiveness has earned him some more opportunities. In a game that was just a 3-point game, last year you wouldn't have seen Blake Corum get 7 carries to Williams 13. It would have been, 20-0 or 20-1 in opportunities. And so Corum is doing the right things. I think a lot of people are going to be eyeing that. Maybe you could pay a little more than you want to this year, or you can wait in the next year with the thought process that they're going to keep Williams next year because he's under contract for $9 million and change. And rather than just kind of eat that money, they'll continue to use Williams. So maybe the first few weeks of the season, Williams is kind of pushing Corum aside, and you can go early next year and get him for cheaper. That being said, Corum is earning some opportunities.
Meanwhile, for the Panthers, Bryce Young's stats weren't eye-popping, 15 of 20, 206 yards, but 3 touchdowns, no interceptions. He made some big throws in some big moments, including the game-winning touchdown pass. Are we seeing him kind of mature and improve?
Yeah, Dave Canales has been a quarterback whisperer. He did it with Geno. He did it with Baker. It's been a little longer process with Bryce Young, and I don't know if that's because Canales is the head coach and just has a lot more responsibility and isn't necessarily as hands-on. But Carolina's got some weapons. They need to continue to improve their defense. They made big plays this week. They got turnovers, and that helped them to keep the Rams at bay. I'd like to see more consistency out of Bryce Young. QB 17 on the year. He's got some upside. Will he ever be somebody that pushes for QB 5, QB 6? I don't know if I'm willing to go there, but I think he can become a consistent low-end QB 1, especially if you got guys like McMillan and Coker making plays for him.
Next up, we have the Minnesota Vikings going to Seattle, and this was a horrendous game. Seahawks won 26-0. Max Brosmer made the start. A lot of people were curious to see whether he would be the answer that was better than J.J. McCarthy. 19 of 30, 126 yards, no touchdowns, 4 interceptions. I have to say it was one of the worst quarterback performances I've ever seen. Were you moved by anything you saw?
I was moved to nausea.
Yeah.
I mean, I had some hope.
It was a career worst for Justin Jefferson, only 2 receptions for 4 yards. I wasn't even sure he was going to get a catch because into the fourth quarter, he had no receptions.
It was, you feel bad for Max Brosmer, and maybe it's something he can overcome on his path to being a career backup. But he wasn't ready for prime time. And as much as I wanted to see him play well, it's after being quarterback proof through 5 different quarterbacks, we found 2 that don't work for Justin Jefferson, and that's McCarthy and Brosmer. And Brosmer made us go, let's try that McCarthy guy again. That's how bad Brosmer was.
It was amazing. In this game, we had 2 of the best receivers in the league in Justin Jefferson and Jackson Smith and Jigba, and they combined for 4 receptions and 27 yards on 10 targets. That's just not what you're hoping to see. The Seahawks are 9-3. They're tied with the Rams record-wise. They're making a case for the playoffs. Sam Darnold, QB 15 this year, has not been as exciting or looked as great as he did at times for Minnesota, but how are we feeling about him and his fit here in Seattle?
I'd like to see him be a little more efficient, but that being said, Flores has the Vikings defense playing well. They're number 5 in the NFL against the pass. And Darnold didn't have to throw the ball a lot, so it wasn't like he was out there slinging it all over the yard. But 14 of 26 for only 128, probably not the kind of outing you wanted to see. But they got up early in the second quarter with the Myers field goal and the Jones interception return. You want to see them get in the end zone. They kicked 4 field goals against the Vikings, and Darnold's got to be better. The running game, the Walker and Charbonnet had 27 carries, a little right around 4 yards a carry with 1 touchdown. If Darnold is only throwing for 128, you got to believe one of those guys is putting up a big day, and neither one of them did.
Meanwhile, if you were looking for efficiency, Buffalo at Pittsburgh was definitely not the place to find it. The Bills do get the 26-7 victory. After a couple weeks of being a healthy scratch due to discipline issues, Keon Coleman back in the lineup. Only saw 3 targets, but they only threw for 123 yards. Did catch 2 for 9 yards and a touchdown, which means they looked for him in the red zone. Do you think this was a positive sign if you roster Coleman?
So I don't know that they looked for Coleman in the red zone. Josh Allen just looked to see who was open, and it happened to be Coleman. Coleman was 4th on the team in snaps in wide receivers. But that being said, when your chance comes, you got to make a play. You got to be ready. I told Cole all season, we knew he wasn't going to play in the varsity game, but he was dressing for every game. And on the way to drop him off for every game, I'd ask him, are you ready if they call your number? And he would say yes. And so I think Keon Coleman, he's had some ups and downs in the off-field perspective, but when his number was called this week, he was ready. And that's how you got to build it. The Bills need a bona fide wide receiver 1. Maybe Coleman can become that guy. They need Khalil Shakir plays a great role, but he's best suited to be a 2.
Meanwhile, Pittsburgh, they were once pretty far out in front in their division, but they have really slumped badly of late. Now 6-6, technically same record, but behind the Ravens. They close at the Ravens, home for the Dolphins, at the Lions, at the Browns, home for the Ravens. Only one team from the AFC North is making the playoffs. Are the Steelers kind of cooked?
As my boy Snoop Dogg would say, sizzle, sizzle, rizzle.
I think they'd have to sweep the Ravens to make it.
Yeah. No, and the Ravens aren't playing real good, but they're definitely playing better. This game got so bad that Caleb Johnson got carries and Ben Skoranek had a target. So if that tells you how things were going, the memes around what Aaron Rodgers looked like with the busted up nose and some of those things were just hilarious. So unfortunately, I think this might finally be the year that Tomlin goes 8-9.
Maybe.
But Cincinnati and Cleveland aren't great teams, so the chance that they still pull out that 9-8 record, that's possible. I don't think they're a playoff team. I think you keep riding Jaylen Warren if you're rostering him. If you can have him as your RB2, I think you're good with that.
Basically,
Gainwell is flex worthy.
Even if you gave them the victory over the Dolphins and the Browns, which honestly is no gimme the way they've been playing, they'd have to win one of the 2 against Baltimore and 1 against Detroit, 2 of which are on the road, to make it to 9 wins. And that's where I think you're right. May see a streak snapped. The Las Vegas Raiders went to Los Angeles to battle the Chargers. Was not a great game. 31-14. The Chargers get the victory. It was our first game without Chip Kelly, so we wondered how would the Raiders offense do. Only 125 net passing yards, only 31 yards on the ground. Was this offense better?
It was certainly offensive.
That's true.
Geno's cooked, I think, and it doesn't help that the offensive line isn't very good, and the receiving core outside of Brock Bowers, has some opportunities. Tucker flashes a little bit. Tyler Lockett seems to be resurrected back with Pete Carroll, but the offensive line doesn't give Ashton Genty any room to operate. He's just been horrid this year on the ground. He's saved his fantasy numbers through the air, but he's not been productive at all. Another week working under Greg Olson probably is going to help the offense, but I don't know that they've got a very high ceiling.
Meanwhile, for the Chargers, Justin Herbert broke his or injured his non-throwing hand. He had surgery on it yesterday. They said he could be available this week, but His status will be reevaluated later in the week. If he can't go and miss his time and they're back to the Trey Lance show, how are we feeling about the Chargers?
Well, it looks like they're tracking to maybe get Omari and Hampton back this week, which would bode well for them if they have to go with Trey Lance. That being said, we don't have any idea what we're getting out of Trey Lance. We know he was the third overall pick 76 years ago, but he's only played like 12 snaps in the NFL over the last 3 decades. So we don't know what we're going to get there. Yes, folks, that was hyperbole. But Lance has flashed a little bit. He seems like he's comfortable. Jim Harbaugh has a history of hiding his quarterback going back to J.J. McCarthy at Michigan. So we know Harbaugh knows how to make the quarterback disappear. And if Omari and Hampton is back, Kamani Vidal was 25 for 126 and a touchdown this week. So
they got to feel good because they're playing the Eagles, who just gave up 100 yards per rusher to everyone in Chicago.
Right. So, that may bode well, but, Lance, I wouldn't mind seeing what he can do. We haven't had a chance to really.
He looks better in the preseason I think we're going to get a chance to see whether he starts the game or not, because the Eagles have a pretty good pass rush and the Chargers have no tackles, which doesn't bode well for, Aaron Rodgers. Yeah, it didn't bode well for Justin Herbert. I mean, we saw what happened to Aaron Rodgers last week. Sunday Night Football, the Denver Broncos outlasted the Washington Commanders 27-26 in overtime. It was another good game for Evan Ingram. He's had 5 or more targets in each of the last 3 weeks, caught 6 for 79. Looks like they are trying to get him the ball. Does that give you some encouragement down the stretch for fantasy?
So, yes, it gives me encouragement. And then I remember that his coach is Sean Payton, and he could very well go out there next week and not get a single dang target. I mean, Troutman had 4 targets. Nix threw the ball 40 times, only 1 touchdown. It's good for Ingram, but if you plug, we're at that point now where we're saying, okay, this is a trend. We're going to go chase those points, and that's when into the tunnel that's painted on a rock. That's my fear, that what we're going to get out of Ingram this week is basically, the Acme anvils hitting me on top of the head. That being said, if Nix is going to throw the ball 45 times, you want to get some pieces of that passing offense.
For the Commanders, it certainly looks like, even though they're using a number of backs back there, that Chris Rodriguez Jr. has become the main guy. He was the one that they started. He was the one they leaned on in the fourth quarter. Is he becoming the back that you want to play for Washington?
He is, but he's a flex, basically. He's a touchdown dependent. He's a flex that you hope gets a touchdown that could bump him into a low-end RB2 range. He isn't involved much in the passing game. And with Mariota, even though he threw the ball 50 times, the passing game can be kind of erratic. It was nice that McLaurin was back, had plenty of volume. Ertz got a ton of volume. Debo. So, they fed the ball to the guys you want to have the ball. But the running game isn't giving you the kind of production you really need if he doesn't get a touchdown. I think 50 yards is probably the ceiling for Rodriguez, because he's not – I don't know that there's many teams in the league where he's going to get 20 carries against.
And I just wish I knew what happened with Krosky Merritt. They didn't say really he got injured, and they liked him enough preseason that they got rid of Brian Robinson, and he's just all but disappeared. He was the third back in on Sunday night, only 4 carries for 20 yards, not involved in the passing game, but just a weird situation. Speaking of weird backfields, Monday night, the Giants went to New England. The Patriots got the 33-15 victory. But I think the thing that I find curious is the same on both of these teams, a tandem backfield, and you just never know what you're going to expect. For the Giants, Devin Singletary got 12 carries for 68 yards and a touchdown, also got 3 receptions. Tyrone Tracy, who you'd like to think is their main runner, got 10 carries for 36 yards, 1 reception for -3. And on the flip side for New England, after thinking that maybe Ramondre Stevenson was out of the mix, he led them in carries with 12, only 40 yards. Travion Henderson, 11, got 67, neither of them getting into the end zone. Ramondre Stevenson, 3 receptions for 40 yards. Henderson, 3 for 19. Are both these backfields just going to be a complete cluster for fantasy the rest of the season?
So Henderson provides the pop. He had the a nice run. He's the one that's going to be electric, and unfortunately, I think we're going to continue to see them split in New England, just because Ramondre Stevenson provides a little bit of security as long as he's not fumbling. He's better in pass protection at this point. But Henderson, if I'm going to start one of the two New England backs, I'm starting Henderson because I know he can provide the explosive play. He may not, but if they're both getting, 16, 17 opportunities, I'm going to bet on Henderson being the one to provide the big play. Over in New York, it feels like Singletary's their goal line back, Singletary's their passing down back. I don't know that they, like, if Tracy's in there and they get inside the 10, I don't think they're purposely taking out Tracy for Singletary right away. They'll give Tracy an opportunity or two, but if he doesn't get in the end zone, then they're going to Singletary. They're also playing through, an interim coach, a lot of stuff going on in New York. Abdul Carter was suspended for the first quarter. Did you hear why?
The thing about porn was a rumor, an internet rumor.
Yeah. Well, it certainly was a rumor, but that's, whatever. So, it's not great to have, your hot rookie defense bench for a quarter. It was a tough game for New York, and Jackson Dart couldn't get anything going on down the field. He was under a lot of pressure. Jackie was happy Darius Slayton caught his one pass for the touchdown. That helped propel her to a win. But, Henderson's the guy I want to start in New England because he provides the upside. And Singletary's the guy I would be starting in New York because it feels like he's the guy getting the goal line opportunities.
Well, that's a wrap on week 13. We have week 14, which is the final week of buys, probably the last week of the regular season for a lot of us in our fantasy seasons. So we'll be back on Thursday previewing the week, including a big Thursday night matchup with the Lions and the Cowboys. But until then, baby. Dennis, if people are like me and likely to get a snow day tomorrow, what can they do to fill that time?
Well, that would be a great day to go to your favorite podcast platform, hit that search button, type in the Fantasy Football Roundtable podcast, give us a subscribe, give us a like, leave us a rating and a review.
We would appreciate it. Hope you guys have a wonderful and safe Wednesday. We will see you on Thursday.